Good morning. Welcome to the Accessible Hunter podcast. I'm Greg Trainer along with my co-host Mike Hudson, and we have a really good opportunity this morning to talk with Justin Ruger, who is a beekeeper with a disability. So that's something we don't usually get to promote here on our podcast. Mike, how you doing down in South Carolina, buddy?
Oh man, we're good today, guys. I truly appreciate the awesome opportunity. I'm excited to hear more about beekeeping. I actually took one of the little master's weekend beekeeping classes, but yeah, Justin's the expert. All I did was get to tinker with him.
Well, man, with us buying the farm this year, we decided that we need some pollinators. So last weekend, Beth and I went to our first beekeeping class and kind of an expo, and Justin's name was tossed out to me as a guy that does a lot with accessibility and beekeeping. So I'm so excited to have him on this morning. Justin, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you and Mike having me on the podcast and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit more about, my nonprofit and some of the things that are happening with accessible beekeeping in the United States.
Well, man, we're glad to have you on. And whenever I was down in Morgantown on Saturday, your name came up from several people, and I reached out to you, and you were just so easy to talk with, and agreed to be on the podcast. So we sure appreciate you.
Yeah, it's all my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Did,
I've been to a couple of the Morgantown festival or conferences myself. So I met a lot of the people there. I've given talks on accessibility at them. I couldn't make this one, which would have been amazing if we would have ran into each other.
Yeah, it was just such a good group of people. I mean, whenever my wife and I rolled in there, we didn't know a soul. And by the time we were, leaving for the day, it felt like we made some really good friends and some people that are willing to mentor us because, again, we have no idea what we're doing. This is all new to us. And my wife's taking the classes and, she'll be the primary on all this. But it was just such a welcoming environment down in Morgantown.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Justin, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and, maybe disclose a little bit about your disability and how you got involved with, accessible beekeeping and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as Greg and Mike said, my name is Justin Ruger. I was a nuclear physics PhD student at the Catholic University of America. And I was driving home and got into a car accident where the car flipped, and that gave me a traumatic brain injury and seizures from the traumatic brain injury. And then a couple years later, I had a stroke that left me with some hemiplegia on the right side. And then that's when I started getting into beekeeping because I became, kind of depressed. And my mother at the time, my mother had gotten into beekeeping, and she supported a crowdfunding called Flow Hive.
Mhm.
And it's a specific way to harvest the honey that's different than the traditional way. So we received that, and at that situation, at first I couldn't get into the hive, so I would just take my wheelchair and go to the outside the apiary, and then I would do like take pictures and videos and kind of record everything. And then as physical therapy and rehab, I started getting stronger. I wrote a few children's books about beekeeping that I used the iPad and the Apple Pencil to be able to rehab the weakness in my right arm to kind of get used to the fine motor skills again.
Right.
And then I went to the Hive Life conference in 2022. That I met a lot of great people, and I was selling my book, and they told me that I should start a nonprofit that um, centered around bees. And first, my goal was to do like beekeeping in schools. and getting children, and because I had written the children's books, I was going to get the children involved. And then I started researching it, and I found out that there's a lot of red tape on getting, because of allergies and stuff, of getting into schools. So I decided to focus on, a little on accessible beekeeping and how the struggles I was having, I figured they were not just my struggles. There had to be other beekeepers, people that wanted to be beekeepers or people that were already beekeepers that suffered, back injuries or different things that changed their course of life that want to keep keeping bees. So I decided to start accessible beekeeping, and that is how everything got to the foundation of accessible beekeeping.
Justin, how do the bees respond to you in your chair? My chair makes a lot of clicking and buzzing. I don't know if you're in a electric or power. A power or manual chair. Mine makes so much noise. I just wonder how the bees interact and react to your chair.
My power chair, it's a Q3 Jazzy, I think it is. It's pretty silent, but like there's the old saying of people telling you not to run your lawnmower near the hives
Right.
because the vibrations can unsettle the hives, but people do it all the time and it doesn't seem to have any adverse effect. When you pull up to the hives and you shut off the chair, then you're no longer disturbing or having any chance of disturbing the bees until you close the hive back up.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
I know that they make different styles of hives, Justin, that lend more accessibility than just the standard hives. You want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the adaptive equipment and how you have things set up, to help you?
Yeah, I would love to. So, one of the things that we're doing with the nonprofit is an experimental and learning apiary, and we're putting different hive systems into the apiary. One, to have the ability to teach others that have disabilities and give them a place that they can come and interact with different hive types and see what works with them and what doesn't work with them without going out and spending the money up front, but to find something that does not work. The traditional is Langstroth. It's a fantastic system, but it's heavy. It's a lot of twisting and turning, lifting heavy boxes, a lot of balance requirements.
Mhm.
So there are a few other hive systems. There's a top bar hive, which instead of using frames is built horizontally. So it doesn't go from the ground up like Langstroth. It's built side to side, and they use bars instead of frames. And the bars just kind of rest on the top under the lid, and then the bees build out from that. I just recently received a less chowder um, top bar hive from Texas that I'm putting into the apiary this year. So I haven't had any personal experience with the top bar hive, but after this season, I'll be able to put more videos on my YouTube channel how it works with me and the stuff that I have. I worked with a company called Horizontal Bees in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and they do horizontal Langstroth hives. And one of the things that I was telling him is I was like, I have an issue where horizontal hives seem to be too high. Um, but if you lower them too much, then they're also too low. And
Right.
it's hard to find a sweet spot when you're in a chair, whether it's a wheelchair or a chair that you pulled out there because you can't stand for a long time. So his idea was to make a tilting hive.
Okay.
So I have videos on my YouTube channel and podcasts, Accessible Beekeeping and more of it in work. And then on the website is a picture of it tilting. And what it does is it's in its flat horizontal orientation for the majority of the time. And then when you come up to it, you have latches on it that you unlatch, and it rotates 45 degrees towards you. So then instead of reaching over the hive and lifting up, you're pulling out out of a book bag that you had resting on your knee.
I actually watched that video this weekend, Justin. That was one of the things that kind of drew me to you. To me, it almost looked like a big chest freezer that kind of tilts down to you, and you're able to, as you said, pull it towards you, not up. And going back to one of your other statements too about, as people get older, they start to age. Beekeeping is a heavy lifting activity. I mean, some of these cases that we have to lift are about 47, 50 pounds.
Right.
And that was, one of the concerns my wife had, that, it would be, heavy lifting that straight up. So as people age, there are adaptations available, just like everything else. I mean, whether we're hunting or golfing or what have you, people can make adjustments and still do their hobbies. So it's great that you're, promoting this, a different way to do it, and opening this up not only to new beekeepers like myself, but maybe people who are aging out, kind of deal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, those are just a couple of the hives. There's also Layens hive, the one we have it's Layens. It is built by Bearsville Bees in West Virginia, Parkersburg, West Virginia. It's a different hive, so it's lower to the ground, and the frames are a deep and a half. So the frames are taller, but because it's lower to the ground and you don't have boxes stacked on top of boxes, it is easier to lift one frame that's longer than it is to lift multiple boxes. If anybody is a beekeeper or having trouble with laying straw and they are viewing your podcast, if they're working with deeps, they could also try mediums if they don't want to spend the money to switch to a completely different hive system. There are different depths that the boxes come in, and the mediums are way less. The mediums and the shallows weigh less than the deeps do when they're fully packed. So when you keep bees, you usually have one or two boxes of brood, which is where the baby bees are, and the queen and all the food and pollen and everything. You usually have one or two boxes of those, and you check them, but you don't do a lot of manipulating with them. Disturbing, yeah. So the soup, a lot of people will do deeps for their brood chambers, and then they'll put the queen excluder on, and they'll do shallows for the supers or mediums for the supers. And that means that when you're lifting the boxes that have just the pure honey in it, it's lighter than working with a full deep of 80 to 100 pounds of honey in it.
About how many bees do you run, Justin? How many different hives and whatnot?
I have a Layens, I have a Langstroth, I have the tilting horizontal, and then I'll have the top bar heat hive this year, and I'm waiting on getting one from a Parkinson hive from Michigan. So I'm hoping in the next couple of years there'll be about 5, because I'm not to the point yet where I'm trying to do it, commercially or anything. It's more
Right.
what's manageable, and focusing on the nonprofit and how to bring people to the apiary to learn from it rather than to mass produce anything.
Right.
It's funny that you mentioned Bearsville Bees in Parkersburg, West Virginia. One of my first jobs out of college, I lived down in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and these folks, Bob and Joy, were at the expo, and we bought our hives off of them this weekend. So it's such a small world. You're down in Florida talking about them. I'm up in Pennsylvania, and you run into these folks, and just everything's like handmade. This is a family that produces these. They're not, on an assembly line. Bob was so gracious, gave me his number and said, you have any issues or questions at all, you give him a call. And, I like that small business where you can pick up the phone and talk to the owner, or get his wife on the phone, talk to her, and get really good service.
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do when these companies send out these hives or donate these hive systems to the nonprofit is we try to be unbiased. So we look at it as at a system and how it's going to help and benefit other people. I've talked to Bob and Joy a couple times because I was having trouble with the dexterity and stuff in my hands pulling the frames out, because I don't know which if what they're at now, but a couple years ago you just had 2 wire strips at the top of the frame that you had to peel out with a hive tool. So one of the things that one of the beekeepers in Virginia that worked with the nonprofit as well, the idea that we had was getting like drawer handles.
Mm-hmm.
And modifying the frames to put the drawer handles in there, so when you are lifting it, you're grabbing the handle and lifting the frame directly out instead of trying to inch its way out by the wire or the wire that's ran through it. When the first model of the tilting hive was made, it was the first time he's ever done anything anything like this. So he did not put a stopper in it. So by the time I had gotten to the hive, the person who was the property that was holding the hive for me had put a stopper in there, and the stopper is now built into the new models. But if you lost control or lost the grip on the hive, there was nothing to stop it from fully just swinging. So we do things like that. Like we notice that, okay, this is something that's not going to work for somebody else. And then we go back to the company and we say, hey, maybe we should figure out a modification or a way to stop this from happening. And then it goes into future productions. So the hives are continually growing and expanding and getting better with each person that uses it and sending back feedback to these companies. So I wanted to say, if you ever buy a hive from somebody that's different than Langstroth and its specialty, make sure that you do keep in contact with the company and tell them what works and what doesn't work, because it may make somebody's life in the future easier from your experience.
Right. That seems to be the biggest thing with anything with disability world, right? Is we're the disability world is a small community, but we need to pan together and work together to find new ways to be able to advocate and make sure we're building the best products. And they don't know, we have such differences, hand dexterity differences, capabilities with trunk. There's a ton of stuff out there. And unfortunately, the world's really not, especially in the outdoor world, is not really accessible. Justin, you hit the nail on the head. If we want a good product, we got to be able to carry on a conversation to make sure they know what our needs are.
Yeah, we have to advocate for ourselves.
100%.
And Justin, one of the things I noticed in your video was you were using your iPhone, is kind of to magnifying things. You want to talk a little bit about visual impairment and beekeeping as well? I mean, you're doing some stuff with your phone that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. So I started my podcast. I did it for about 6 or 7 months before I had to move, and the place that we went to was a campground in Front Royal, and it couldn't get good cell service to be able to do any kind of video streaming. But one of the people that I had on the podcast was a blind beekeeper from California.
Oh, wow.
100% completely blind. And she was explaining to me how, she can't use gloves because it takes away the touch. How she listens for the sounds of the hive, and she's gotten so accustomed to the different sounds that the hive makes that she can tell, if it's queenless or if they're in distress, or And there is science behind that, that some acoustic monitoring devices that claim that they can tell you some of the abnormalities of your hive based on the daily sound fluctuations. So I started talking to her, and I got my undergrad in computer engineering and computer science before I switched to physics. And I was like, well, I have a really high interest in artificial intelligence. So one of the things that I did was through the nonprofit, I started developing an app called My Hive Inspector. And what it does is it uses the camera on your phone to help you do hive inspections using artificial intelligence.
That's amazing. I mean, just amazing.
So I'm currently, it's in beta, it's out for testing. I think I'm giving a talk at the Honeybee Laboratory at the University of Florida next weekend, and I'll have the most recent updated beta pushed out by then. The model, I got new pictures, so the model's training. So right now the beta is not accessible, but you can go onto the Be My Hive Inspector page on accessiblebeekeeping.org, and I have some videos on there that show you it in action, some pictures that show you how it looks when it identifies. So the things you can do is you can upload a video. So if you're just recording a video while you're in the hive and then want to go back and see what the artificial intelligence pinpoints in there, you can do that. If you see something, if you go in the hive and you see something that you're not sure what it is, the app is consistently growing. Continually growing. So we're asking for people to send pictures in that we can use to train the model to make it better. So not all abnormalities are in the app yet, but if you snap a picture, you can go back and sit on your, lazy boy chair and pull up the app and load the picture into the app, and then it will analyze it for you and tell you what it sees. And then as I receive more pictures and the model grows, the more inference and detections it's going to be able to make.
Right.
So and then you can also use the live camera. So you can, if you're holding your phone, I think the video that you watched, I'm actually holding the phone using the live camera feed, and it's analyzing it as the camera feed is running. So I started that and I made the app, and then I was talking to the blind beekeeper in California, and she said the way that she does it is she goes out there by herself because she's been doing bees since before she was blind, and she'll feel on the frames and feel the different bumps and textures of the different brood cappings and honey, and she will take pictures and send the pictures to a sighted beekeeper, and the sighted beekeeper will say, okay, you have healthy laying pattern, you have healthy brood, you have honey in here, and then if she spots the queen, she'll say, oh, you have a queen that's healthy. And I was like, well, this is perfect, so let me get her access to my app. But at the beginning it was all visual, so I was like, okay, how can I modify the app to make it so that she can use it? And I added the function for the app to read back to you what it detects. So when she holds the phone up, and it says that there's a queen bee, the app is actually going to say queen bee and the percentage of confidence that it has that it detected the queen bee. So she's tested it a few times. It did take some time to modify it because I built a graphical user interface, and then she was like, this is hard for me to navigate. So then I'd rebuild the graphic user interface. And she was like, well, once it reads it to me, I can't get access. Can't go back and look at what I detected. So then I added a list in there so that she could see everything that it detected. So it's been It's been pretty good. I do work with different universities that are giving me pictures and helping me get this application out there for beekeepers to use. I'm hoping to have it fully published by um, probably January of next year.
Wow, Mike, that's way above our pay grade on programming and computers, at least on mine, huh?
Oh, absolutely, man. You know, we live in a beautiful time, guys. Technology's come a long way. They got tech in everything, and it doesn't matter about hand dexterity or whatever your physical inabilities are. Man, all they are is limitations of the mind. It seems like we can find some kind of tech that can aid and try to pretty much bridge a gap in everything we're facing. The biggest thing is making sure we're putting out quality equipment and just like Justin said, getting the information out there. Get out and share your story, whatever it is. You know, we've got to advocate for ourselves, and if we don't, I think we're doing a detriment to our community. And that's the biggest crux. Is it's not about getting on a soapbox. It's about getting out there and saying these products are the best. You guys check them out. I don't say it. I use them too. And then, like Justin just said, I can walk you through it if you need me to.
Yeah, so other than the app development, I also have been working with some companies, like I mentioned earlier, about, horizontal bees and um, Bearsville bees and Parkersburg. One of the other ones that I really like working with, if you're looking for bee suits and equipment for, is Guardian Bee Apparel out of Georgia. So he has a really good story. And one of the problems that we came across was a beekeeper that was in the military, or a person who wanted to get into beekeeping, who was in the military, was paralyzed on their right side. And because of that, they couldn't put their hand into a glove, a traditional glove. So we worked with the company Guardian Bee Apparel, and they designed a mitt that would work for this person's disability. So one of the things that I like to do is, work hand in hand with these companies, not just to change what products they already have, but also invent and design new products that that can move forward in the accessibility realm.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Justin, because as a quadriplegic, that was one of my concerns is I can't really get my hand into gloves. And if they have a mitten designed, that's really going to be beneficial to me where I can still drive my chair up to the hive and I have a mitten instead of a glove. So you really benefited me just by telling that story.
Yeah, I will text you a picture of the mitt after we're done with the conversation, and then I can get you and Terry into contact with each other.
That'd be awesome. Um, I know that when you're starting any new hobby or anything new, especially with a disability, you have some reservations and fears, however you want to say it. What would you kind of say to somebody with a disability that wanted to try beekeeping? What advice would you give them?
So one of the things that I would say is that bees are patient and forgiving. And that's one thing that I had to learn because, being around dogs all my life, and, family members that had horses, they require constant maintenance. And bees, there's right ways and wrong ways to do things, but with a disability, if you can only get into the hive, I mean, they recommend that you do it, every 2 weeks during the springtime, and then maybe every 3 or 4 weeks in summer, and then back to 2 weeks in the fall before you leave them alone for the winter. If you have an issue, whether it's, anxiety, PTSD, physical limitation, and you planned on going, you needed to go on the bees in the first week of April. If you can't make it out there until the second or the third week of April, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. They're going to feed themselves. They're going to take care of themselves. They're going to remove the dead bees. You may have a more of a mess to clean up when you get in there, only because, you know, if they grow out of room, they start building wax in every crevice.
Right.
So the more that you're able to get into it, the easier future inspections will be. But if you have to miss a planned inspection, it's not going to damage your success as a beekeeper.
Mhm.
So it's and then, you know, other after that, I tell them that it's accessible with the right mindset. So I wouldn't run out and say, okay, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy this hive type. I'm going to start a business. You know, you have to know your limitations as well.
Right.
So I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but if you can manage easily or comfortably 5 hives, don't try 10.
Mhm.
Right. It's
Like
about
that's
bringing
not,
honest feedback, you know?
yeah, it's like you have to know your limitation and not go past what you can handle, because once you go past what you can handle, it no longer becomes a fun hobby. It becomes a job. And then the stress of that on somebody who has a disability can make things worse.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Plus, it gives a worse product to the bees. The bees aren't being tended to the way they need to. You know, it's just it becomes from what was a good positive thing. Next thing you know, you add mass chaos. Uh, you know, and two, you hit a thing just a minute ago. It's we can't know everything about everything, but you were able to give more information that Greg could really tie in to, you know, how to find a new mitt and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of what we do with this setup is to say, you know, we don't know everything, but we know somebody that does, and be able to team them up with experts like you that have been doing it grassroots style, figuring it out, and you know, going from there. Now you're going to different universities and talking to them, man, and that's phenomenal, Justin. I truly appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm pretty excited about the one at the University of Florida. I'm also going
Sure.
to the National Training Workshop for National AgrAbility in Atlanta, Georgia, the following week to give a talk on accessible beekeeping with two other people that are leaders in the accessible world in beekeeping. And it's really exciting because are you familiar with what National AgrAbility is?
Now,
I, I'm fairly familiar with AgrAbility.
mhm.
You know, I know that they work hand in hand with OVR through the
Right,
different states. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about it for the people that don't know?
right,
Okay, so National AgrAbility is not a funding for people with limitations and disabilities, but what they do is there's 25 states that have a National AgrAbility chapter in it. And if your state has one and you reach out to them, they can help you by sending a uh, person who's certified assistive technology professional. There we go. Sorry.
Mm.
They send you an assistive technology professional who will come to your apiary and your farm, able to look at your situation, what you're desiring to do, and give you guidance on different things that you can modify and change to make your life easier. So they work a lot with like farmers and cattle farmers, and you know, helping decide what modifications to make to tractors. So if you have a disability, you're interested in agriculture, I would definitely recommend looking at the National AgrAbility website to learn if they're in your state, and then possibly reach out to them to see how they can help you if they are able to kind of give you guidance on how to be successful with your disabilities. One of the reasons I'm excited about the National Training Workshop is like when we go to these beekeeping workshops, it's people who want to be beekeepers. When you go to the National Training Workshops, it's professionals who are coming to get their continuing education credits and learn about these different topics to go back to their states and help people that can benefit from it. So I'm really excited about the National Training Workshop because that means that anybody who comes to our beekeeping talk can go back to their states all over the country and help somebody who has a disability that might not have access to somebody
Right.
in that locale.
And Justin, you had mentioned this, and Mike says this all the time, that maybe the biggest disability is in our own minds on our limitations of what we think we can and can't do. And when people are exposed to new ideas and new assistive technology and different ways of doing things, it can really open up the world of any choices that they want to make, whether it be beekeeping, whether it be, going back to work, going to school. There's assistive technology out there. You just have to find the right assistive tech, and having these assistive tech evaluations, having the professional come to your apiary, that's just amazing that they're willing to do that. And I don't believe there's any cost to the individual for these folks to come out and give the evaluation.
No, I don't believe there's any cost either. But so one of the nonprofits that I wanted to mention when we were having our talk is Heroes to Hives.
Mm-hmm.
They're based out of Michigan, and they're for veterans and first responders and their families. But what they recommend is that you take a beekeeping class your first year, get some hands-on experience with a mentor before jumping into it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a veteran or first responder, there's hives for heroes as well.
And we got to meet another organization this weekend, Justin, Mission Believe. And those folks are out of Maryland. Super nice folks. And several of these organizations do online beekeeping courses that you can sign up for free if you're a veteran or a family member. And there's just a lot of resources out there for people.
Yeah, it's just knowing where to look and listening to the suggestions that these people make, because it's easy to go out and spend $800 to get a setup and some bees and put them in your yard, and once the honeymoon period's over, decide that it's just not working for you. So I do agree with go out and try to find a mentor, go work on their property for a little bit, see if you actually want to do it for an entire season. And if it's something that you're able to do, and if they're doing Langstroth and you love keeping the bees, but you can't do the lifting, then you have an idea without spending money of what hive system to look for so that you can do what you want to do.
Great. Justin, I'm going to turn to the tables a little bit and talk about, the fruits of your labor. What's the best thing about honey that you like, or what kind of products do you enjoy because of the bees?
The honey. Honey and pollen. So there's beekeepers out there that put pollen traps on the entrance to their hives, and when the bee flies in, because they have pollen pockets on their back legs, they push all the pollen to, and that's how they carry it from flower to the hive. The pollen trap will knock it off their legs, and you can actually eat that raw pollen. If you get that pollen from a local apiary, it can help you with your allergies, because it helps you build immunity to that to the pollen in your area. So if you're wanting to support honeybees and beekeepers, always buy local if you can, because you never know if the grocery store has brought their honey from outside of your area, where you'll still get the honey benefits, but you won't get the allergy benefits.
Right. And and Justin, when you said about supporting beekeepers, and I always try to, support my local small business and things. But what can people do to support, the honeybees in general in their environment around their homes? What can people do to kind of promote bees?
You could definitely plant wildflowers or lavender plots, and look for plants that are um, perennial in your area that are great for pollination, and plant those in your garden. One of the big issues, other than pests, that bees deal with is pesticides.
Mhm.
So there are companies out there, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but you register your bees with this company, and then this company will tell you when anybody is spraying pesticides in your area, because then you have to block your bees in the hive for 2 or 3 days while the pesticides are kind of aren't fresh,
Yeah.
or they will wipe out an entire colony if the pesticides can wipe out an entire colony. So limit pesticides. If you have to use pesticides, make sure that you do it through the proper channels, and tell these companies and the government that you're spraying the pesticides, so that they have the resources to inform the beekeepers that the pesticides are going to be in their area.
It's just amazing how much technology is behind beekeeping. I mean, I'm just at the infant stages of learning, and it's just amazing what's going on around my community and around the country. Um, Justin, do you have anything else that you would like to bring up? We generally try to keep our podcast to 40-45 minutes, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about today that we can inform people or drive people to a certain cause or organization that you support?
Yeah. The last thing that I want to mention is on our website, accessiblebeekeeping.org, there is a tab that says Exploratory Paper and Infographics. So if there's viewer goes on there, there's two things there. There's infographics that were provided by Eddie's Orchard that give you an information on pests and intro to beekeeping. So it's kind of like a baby intro. But there's also a paper that was written by myself and a professor, Dr. Brian Wentz, sorry, out of Shippensburg University, that did an exploratory data research on U.S. beekeepers with disabilities. So you can actually go through and read the paper and see what percentage of beekeepers are. It's like 80% say they have a disability, and 40% of those 80 say that it stops them from beekeeping. And then it also goes into like what kind of disabilities beekeepers are dealing with. Like, general back issues was reported 45 times, and fibromyalgia. And you can see some of the disabilities that people are keeping bees while still having, cancer, heart issues, vision issues, multiple sclerosis, stuff like that. And then it also has some of the feedback from the people, the survey that says, these are things that we would like to see to help us become beekeepers. So if there's any companies that watch your podcast, go read that paper and see what the public has said. This will help us be successful at beekeeping, and see if you can adapt it or build it or invent it so that you can help the community.
Awesome. Mike, you got any parting words or any parting thoughts today? We might have lost Mike. I'm not sure. Maybe he lost his connection. But Justin, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, and we'll put some links in the bottom for everyone to follow you. And man, I hope you have a great season, and I hope we can touch base again. And I'll be trying to get more information out of you about the gloves and other things that I can do to make it more accessible for me.
Yes, sir. I would love to hear from you guys.